So to summarise where we are so far, the aim of Buddhist meditation is non-separation. This isn't an idea, it's not a philosophy, it's not something mystical, it's an actual experience, a felt sense of the interconnection between you, the world, and all beings. It's not something we acquire, it's our original state, and it's always available. It gets covered over with the development of the self in early childhood. There are two aspects to meditation: calming the mind, or samatha, and insight, vipassana. Western meditation often gets caught at the first stage, the calming stage, claiming that the purpose of meditation is to engender a psychological wellness. Meditation obviously can do that, but that's the preliminary stage. Calming the mind enables insight. And insight isn't the acquisition of some special personal quality, like enlightenment or wisdom. It's the felt experience of non-separation. Meditation is the central practice of Buddhism because it's the best way to achieve this felt experience. And this experience of non-separation is a present experience during meditation, not a future one. Practice grounds it, makes it more visible, deepens it, and widens it. So we can see meditation as practice enlightenment, as you will, rather than meditation being the path to enlightenment. Because Western meditation focuses on the mind and neglects the body, there's an unbalanced emphasis on tranquility, calmness, and non-agitation. And to see these as future goals, and a neglecting of present time joy and vitality. And this gives an unfortunately austere and arduous sense to meditation, something we need to put in the hard yards, rather than the Dharma gate of ease and joy, in Dogen's words. This unbalanced focus on the mind means the instructions we receive on how to meditate are meagre and unhelpful often, and overly psychological. So we're sometimes told to develop witness consciousness, to just allow our thoughts to come and go freely, and so on. And all of that means that it feeds into a tendency to think of Buddhism in terms of a means of getting something later. So when someone talks about meditators being sitting Buddhas now, we think, oh, well, they're either poetical or just crazy. So in the familiar instructions we get about how to meditate, we're generally told that we should sit cross-legged with our knees on the ground and a straight back. But we're not given any instructions about positioning our pelvis or sitting on our sit bones. We're told to tuck the chin in and stretch the back of the neck. That's terrible instructions. We're told to push up with the top of the head. That's terrible instructions as well. And we're told to breathe from the abdomen. So all those instructions, familiar instructions, are either terrible or incomplete, or both. So to get a broader view, we need to look at the origins and other applications of the posture. And the posture of sitting in a cross-legged position was originally a yoga position. The only difference was that in the yoga position, you don't use a cushion. And you pay attention to the base chakra via the pelvic floor, and the crown chakra at the crown of the head, and the energetic connection between the two via an enlivened spine. And in Chinese Tantra, also you have this cross-legged position, and there one brings energy from the base up the energetic back channel to the top of the spine, then across to the third eye, and then down the front energetic channel. And the two channels are connected by the tongue, which touches the roof of the mouth to maintain a connection between the two. So those are other possible reflectors of posture. When I started Zazen, the focus was on getting into a cross-legged position with our knees on the ground. And if you couldn't do that, we were encouraged to prop our knees until we could. And the logical outcome of that trend would have been to push until we were able to sit full lotus, but that generally didn't happen. Almost all practitioners would sit half or quarter lotus, or Burmese, where both feet are on the ground. But the focus on the extent to which we're sitting cross-legged is, in a way, a distraction. Because the secret of Zazen is the integrity and dynamism of the spine. Not the spine as we picture it, but the spine as we concretely experience it. And the secret of that is the correct position of the pelvis. Most of us tuck our pelvis underneath us, putting weight on our back and collapsing the deep postural muscles at the front of our body, which go up through our torso to our neck and head, naturally giving us a fluid, upright posture with a light head and no tension in the neck. Our sit bones are called sit bones for a reason. We should be sitting on them. To get a sense of them, you can lift yourself up off your seat, stick your bum out, and then sit back down. And you should be able to notice two bony protuberances. That's your sit bones. If you're sitting on them, you should notice much more ease in your torso. You'll sit upright naturally. In our group, we place such emphasis on posture because if we sit correctly with our pelvis at the right angle and our weight dropping down through our sit bones, then the whole spine becomes dynamic. Our head is no longer a weight on our torso. It's light, and our whole body is integrated and experienced as a dynamic oneness with the spine at the centre, rather than as a body of disparate parts. You can't sit properly if your knees are off the ground because your weight's thrown back, but that doesn't make the converse true. You're not necessarily sitting properly if your knees are on the ground. Obviously, when you're in half lotus, your pelvis is tilting, but even if you're in the Burmese position, your pelvis isn't symmetrical because one foot being in front of the other torques the pelvis a little. By non-coincidence, at the start of the COVID lockdown, I started sitting much more, but also because I'd injured my knee, I started sitting in a chair. And I'd sit on a little zafu, about half the height I'd normally use, which I placed on the firm chair. And whatever else could be said about it, sitting on a chair is an even posture. There's a clear balance between left and right. And I think, because of that balance, I became much more aware of my pelvic floor, much as I would have been had I ever been capable of full lotus, which I wasn't. In the Fukan Zazengi, our traditional instructions from Dogen about Zazen, we're given an instruction that just before we start, when we're in position, we sway from left to right. But we're not given an explanation why. I think the reason is that it balances our weight between our two sit bones, so we're not inadvertently weighing down on one side more than the other, or having our spine off centre. We're balanced. Our physical weight is then dropping down equally through our sit bones, and energetically our weight is going down through our centre at the perineum, where, in the traditional Indian outlook, our first chakra, our base chakra, is located. So, if our pelvis and our spine are in the correct position, two consequences follow. First, It opens up our pelvic area as a space of awareness. The whole area of our lower back, our pelvic floor, and our lower belly opens up. Specifically, an area of alive awareness is opened up, which is right within this pelvic bowl. It's as if our spine carries itself energetically right down between our sit bones and into the earth. We are breathing into this whole area, which is felt in energetic terms. It's not necessarily anatomically existing, but we're talking about our actual felt experience. And second, with our spine energetically dropping into the ground, an upward, unconstricting movement is created in the spine. And you can notice this lifting movement in different places. So I notice it in my thoracic spine, mid-chest. It's an up movement which is natural. You naturally feel the back of your head, the back of your neck stretching, and the crown of your head going up, but you're not forcing this movement. You're just allowing it to happen. And accompanying this movement, you'll notice that the back of your neck generally, and the area around the occipital joint in particular, relaxes and widens. If your pelvis isn't in the right position, you'll try to mimic the correct posture by sticking your chest out and consciously pulling your chin in. Don't do this. The tip of your tongue is pressing lightly against the roof of the mouth behind the teeth. And your eyes remain open and relaxed, directed downwards about 45 degrees or so. We breathe through the nose. We shouldn't try to control our breath. We should just breathe naturally. But that means to breathe naturally within the posture. And when we're sitting in the correct posture, our breathing is naturally in the lower abdomen. And in traditional instructions, we're often told to breathe from there. And when people hear that, particularly martial arts practitioners or other people trying to develop energy in their hara, they tend to consciously push their lower belly out on the inhale. Well, obviously your lower belly will go out on the inhale anyway, but to consciously push it out just creates tension and leads to performative Zazen, not natural Zazen. It's much better to develop an awareness of the whole of the pelvic area, the lower belly, the pelvic floor, the sacrum, the coccyx. And as you're breathing, this whole area within your lived experience is fluid and active. And if you're aware of your base chakra, it's helpful to breathe in from there. And if you're not, it's helpful to get a felt sense on the in-breath of your lower belly and your lower back gently going out and your pelvic floor gently pushing the ground. And on the out-breath, all three will relax. Sometimes it's as if you could visualize a soft balloon in the center of your pelvis. When you inhale, the balloon expands, pushing the lower belly, the lower back, and the pelvic floor. When you exhale, it's as if the balloon contracts and all three areas relax. Once you're meditating in the correct posture, what should you be doing with your experience? All the thoughts, sensations, and emotions you're experiencing from moment to moment. Do you try to shut them out? Do you try to ignore them? Do you wish them away? No, you don't. One way Buddhists have of describing human experience is through the 5 skandhas: form, sensation, perception, mental fabrication, and consciousness. And you can divide these into 2. Form and sensation belong to the body, and perception, mental formation, and consciousness belong to the mind. The Heart Sutra says that each of these 5 are empty, and there is no self apart from these 5. And when Dogen describes Zazen as dropping off body and mind, he's referring to these 5 skandhas. In mindfulness meditation, the focus is on mental activity, the perception, mental formation, and consciousness skandhas. And so frequent instruction is that when a thought arises, just notice it, let it go, and return to a wide, spacious awareness, like the open blue sky. And sometimes this instruction works, and sometimes not. When it doesn't, it's helpful to remind yourself that every phenomena which appears manifests at each skandha level. So a thought will have a correlate in the body, and vice versa. If you experience a difficult thought, an intrusive, persecuting thought, for example, then if you don't experience a correlate in your body, tightness somewhere, say, you're restricting your awareness. So, being aware of this restriction, you open your awareness wide. You don't have to get rid of the thought. You just need to be aware of you constricting your attention to this thought alone and release that constriction. You might want to become aware of the subtle movement in your body, for example, with your breath. The breath is central to almost all Buddhist traditions because it returns us to the lived, experienced body. You might want to become aware of what you're feeling in your body without defining it in terms of emotions or anything else. Mainstream Western meditation locates itself somewhere within the 3 mental skandhas. It might, for example, try to locate itself just below the perception skandha, being able to let go of thoughts, perceptions, emotions, and imaginings is dropping off mind. Orthodox meditation doesn't pay too much attention to the body skandhas, but they are the key. They're the key to experiencing non-separation. So what is it to experience form and sensation as empty? Or to use Dogen's phrase, what is dropping off body? One meaning is it's the dropping off of a habitual splitness that we experience within our body, the persistent and continual picturing of our body from a vaguely external perspective. And that's often dominant over what we're somatically feeling and experiencing. We're frequently more aware of what we look like than how we feel. Now, hopefully this is less when we're sitting in the correct posture with a dynamic spine and a spacious and energized body, but it'll still appear. Dropping off the body requires as a prerequisite the dropping off of this visualization of the body. And when we do that, the sense of the body as an object amongst other objects falls away. And although we can still maintain the primary self-world dualism, even when we are somatically embodied, the boundaries are much more porous than when we're trapped in the world of objects, with the body as a special kind of object. And so, particularly in Zazen, there's much more chance that we experience moments when this separation drops off, and we don't experience the world as a collection of objects out there. So far as sensations are concerned, we'll tend to be aware only of a specific sensation, and we'll then classify that and layer on an emotion and a thought. So for instance, I will get something in my jaw and I'll define it as toothache. I'll get anxious, it's going to get worse, and I'll accumulate various trains of thought on top of that. We need to move from that to experiencing sensations as a fluid, changing, interconnecting world of feeling. How can we think of the body? Well, if you ask someone to point to their body, they'll generally point to their torso. They won't point to their head. Yet if we think about it for a moment, it's obvious that our body is all of us. So it's apparent that there's an unconscious split that's going on, whereby our head is identified with ourself and with our mind. Our bodies are the subservient entity, and that's implicit in our everyday language. So if I asked you to paint my portrait, I'd be rather surprised if you painted only my torso, or if you painted my foot. I'd expect you to primarily paint my head. That split is replicated in the idea of meditation as being primarily a mind activity. And because of this unconscious dualism, we ignore what is easiest for us to do, which is to bring our attention to the various aspects of feeling in our head, to the slight tension in our forehead or eyes perhaps, the tightness in our jaw, the sensation of air coming in the nostrils, the sensation of the tongue within the mouth, the texture of the lips, and so on. All these sensations are very accessible to us, much more so than feelings in other parts of our body. So giving attention to that is helpful in a number of respects. Apart from being more accessible, it helps to break the identification which we unconsciously make of our head with our mind. That's one thing. And also, in a slightly different way, again because of that unconscious identification, the head, as it were, embodies the mind. Once the mind is embodied in that way, that embodiment can somatically flow down from the head to the rest of the body. Now, although the language is quite tricky, and certainly my language here I don't think quite captures it, if you practice with these suggestions in mind, I would hope that you would get a sense of it. My other suggestion for becoming more aware of the body, the felt body, not the pictured body, is that you pay attention to a sensation which is neutral. Very often when people practice, they're very aware, too aware, of the cascade of thoughts and emotions. They only become aware of their body when they experience pain or discomfort. And when they do, there's often an anxious contraction of awareness around that pain or discomfort. A torrent of anxious thoughts occur, which reinforces attention on that pain or discomfort. So it's a very good idea to just be aware of neutral sensations in the body and develop a kind of muscle of somatic awareness. Being able to hold within awareness a particular body sensation and hold it within a wider awareness of the rest of the body and the rest of your environment. And if you can develop that habit, then you can gradually reframe body sensation not as something physical, just physical, and specifically located, but energetic, changeable, and connected to everything else. Changeable, impermanent, interdependent. And that's one experience of non-separation. So in these remarks, I've tried to share with you how Zazen is for me at this moment. Some of these comments you will find applicable to you, some not. Some you might find entirely bizarre. You need to make your own mat, which should be a fluid, living thing. You shouldn't try to match yourself up with what you imagine is the experience of someone else. But investigation and sharing of the experience of each of us is a helpful way to deepen and broaden your own experience. And that is an open-ended inquiry. So my goal is the opposite of a definitive account, a definitive how you should sit. It's to open up Zazen, which is to say, to open up your life as a place of open inquiry and expression.